Last night, Gallup came out with a new poll showing that 66% of Americans support having higher taxes on people earning $200,000 and up. It gets worse. 65% of Americans think Obama's jobs plan will help create jobs, and 60% think it will help improve the economy. 72% support more funding for public works projects. 75% more funds to hire teachers, firefighters, and police officers, meaning as shallow as Obama's rhetoric might be, threatening that fires are going to go unquenched, or you're not going to be able to, fires are going to rage because, we have no firefighters, teachers aren't going to be hired. It's scare tactics, but maybe it's working. Joining us now, a man who hopes to be third in line for leadership in the U.S. Senate, my old friend, Senator John Thune, South Dakota Republican, and he joins us now. Senator Thune, how are you?
I'm doing okay, Laura. How are you?
I'm fantastic, but this poll disturbs me.
I know, that is disturbing.
I talked to Paul about this yesterday, and we adore him, and I think he's done a lot of the work that, frankly, other people don't want to do, because it's not very fun to sit there and crunch these numbers and try to figure out how to cut spending and get America back on track. But nevertheless, we still have to win the war of ideas among the electorate. What needs to be done that's not being done today to move these numbers into the right category?
Well, that's a really good question, Laura. But I do think part of it is a communication issue. I think the American people are with us. I think this is a center-right country. I think that the left does a good job of sort of muddying up the issues. But part of it, too, is when they ask questions like that and they say, are you willing to pay higher taxes? If people knew that they were going to have to pay higher taxes so that programs or projects like Solyndra could get funded, that's a very different argument. I think a lot of it comes down to how, if people think that they're going to pay higher taxes because it's going to pay down the debt and it's going to help our children and grandchildren, some might be inclined to do that. But what they don't realize, I think, is that when you send higher taxes to Washington, D.C., it gets spent on more government. And that is something I think we win that debate.
Right. Well, we've been in this tussle, right, for decades, conservatives versus liberals on the role of government.
Right.
And this has been going back since I began following it as a kid, and from Carter versus Reagan, and then Bush and his father before him, and things got muddled, and we started doing American greatness conservatism or compassionate conservatism, and a lot of us were like, wait a second, you're muddying up the water, so you can't distinguish yourselves between the conservatives and the liberals if you're basically spending tons of money yourself. And so now we have the opportunity, right, with this line in the sand that Obama drew and the Rose Garden, going to veto anything that doesn't have tax increases, and John Boehner saying we're not going to have tax increases. Now we can actually have this argument. And I think that's healthy, because we want to know where the country is, and I guess we're going to have to find out next November. But in my mind, and I'd like your view on this, I think the Republicans have a lot of rhetorical work to do. I think the facts are on their side, but it takes some crafting of a message after all these years to get it right.
Yeah, and this is a moment in time, Laura, when we're going to decide what kind of country we're going to be for the foreseeable future. Are we going to be Western Europe, or aren't we? And I think that these times of this is a really important time to be engaged in this debate, because the debate about the size, the role, the scope of government, what government should do and shouldn't do, and as you said, you were on the front lines of this back in your college days. We were having some of these same sorts of debates, but I think we need to draw clear, bright lines, and I think the president, frankly, is helping us do that, because he's made it very clear that his agenda is more government. He does believe in growing the size of government. The government has the answers, has the solutions, and frankly has a disdain for free enterprise and for what really creates jobs in an economy like ours, in a free market economy. But that kind of debate, I believe, is going to be front and center going into this 12 election, because the president represents one side of it, and I hope that our candidate for president and all of us out there who are supporting that person will be very engaged in talking about a role for the government that is limited, that is consistent with our constitutional framework, that is consistent with our heritage and our history and our tradition, and get away from this idea that government can do everything, and that we're to continue to create this sort of entitlement mentality that we have in America today. It's just taking us in an entirely different direction than I think what most Americans want to see us go. But we've got to be able to clearly communicate what it is that we're for and how it differs from what they want.
Well, isn't it a problem, though, that we have a lot of people here in the country now that when you say the Constitution requires or constitutional grounding or this is our heritage, it's really not their heritage. I mean, the melting pot really is struggling, right? Because we have such an influx of people, many of them here illegally, and they have a different viewpoint. And their viewpoint is, you're making a lot of money, I'm not, I want some of your money, and I need better schools, and look, my teachers aren't going to be able to teach because they're not going to have any money because you rich people just keep getting richer. And that argument has to be combated and answered, responded to in a convincing way by people who go into these areas, whether underprivileged areas, inner city areas, Hispanic communities, and take the case of prosperity, real prosperity to the people. I think that's what's necessary. Otherwise, you're never going to outdo the Democrats on the demagoguery front, because they're always going to hold out, dangle the benefits to people, saying this is what we're going to promise you, and the other people are just mean. They're talking about limits, and we're talking about more money in your pocket. That's the concern.
Yeah, well, and I think the dream for Democrats is to get to where you have fewer people paying in than those that are drawing benefits, and that's really kind of unfortunately where we are headed. But I still believe, at least I hope, that there are enough people in this country, and I think a lot of this, that's why I think a lot of these elections are going to get decided in the center of the country, in the heartland, who have a different view of the government, have a different view of the world, have a different view of what this country should be, and really do, I think, buy into this basic core belief that this is a country that was based upon a limited view of the government, that was based upon personal freedom coupled with personal responsibility. And yes, it may be some would say a harsher message, but I think it's a winning message, because I think people understand at some point you can't get something for nothing. We can't just have a bunch of takers in America. We've got to have people who are contributing, and I hope that still is the prevailing view, and it's going to take a very effective articulation of our principles as we get into this 12 election, but we can't afford to lose it, because the future really does hang in the balance, and the stakes are that high. I think we're really at a crossroads in this country, and the president has put us there, but it gives us an opportunity right now to get out and draw those clear, bright lines.
Lamar Alexander, who may or may not be a household name among our listening audience, I mean, he ran for president many years ago, and people remember, I guess, his plaid shirt and so forth. But he's a senator from the great state, of course, of Tennessee, and he decided to step down from a leadership position in the Senate, and it's a third-ranking position, not to get too processy here. But he basically said, I guess, that it was hard for him to be able to work with Democrats because there was this sense that if you're in leadership, you can't work with Democrats. Now he's going to be free to work with Democrats. What's your take on that, given the fact that, you'd like that position?
Well, I think that, everybody has a different way, a different style of doing things, and, each senator comes to their job with a different approach to it, and I think that Lamar was just ready to make a change and to be able to do some things that perhaps he felt constrained about doing as a member of the leadership. But that's a judgment call he had to make. In my case, I just think that as a party, as a leadership, if we're out there talking about winning ideas, then we're going to be on the right side. I think the American people are going to embrace the things that we have to say, and those ideas, I think, are the right ones, the right prescription for the future of this country. So I'm not at all concerned about being a member of the leadership and being able to be out there talking about the things that I think that are important for the future of this country, the ideas that are important to get the country back on track. But everybody has a different way of approaching it, and Lamar made that judgment, made that decision for himself. That'll set off some elections in our leadership and some opportunities for some new people.
Was he pushed out?
No, gosh, no. Lamar's very respected in our leadership and in our conference. He's a guy who has a lot of affection from members of the conference. So I think it was just a personal decision for him.
Do you think that the Republican field is big enough right now? I mean, do you wish, and people thought maybe you would run for president. I mean, we were pushing you to run, but you didn't take my bait or anybody else's, so I was very annoyed by that.
Yeah, right.
I kind of went on a rant early in the hour. I'll describe it as a rant. People who really could beat Obama or have a good chance of beating Obama, but are saying, well, it's my family. And I was thinking of George Washington and leaving the beautiful Mount Vernon to sleep in the cold in Valley Forge to save this country. And I'm concerned that that sense of urgency for the nation among those people who really could give Obama a good run for his money or probably win aren't running. Do you have any sense about the Republican field as it is today?
Well, I think, Laura, that, I know there are people that are always like somebody that, that's not in the race, but I really believe that this president has messed up badly enough, and his record is bad enough. And if our candidate will get out and clearly talk about Republican principles and conservative principles, not as Republican, but conservative principles about the economy and free enterprise and what it takes to create jobs in this country, we're gonna win this election. What we have to make sure that we don't do is not be articulate in how we communicate with the American people about that, and two, not hold the president accountable for his record. We have to do that. We've got to hold him accountable for his record. We've got to draw those contrasts. I think there's going to be plenty of contrasts, and I think that if unemployment is where it is today and economic growth is as sluggish and anemic as it is today, and frankly, this administration isn't doing anything to change that. I mean, none of their prescriptions or policies are, in my view at least, going to move us in a positive direction. We're gonna win this thing, but we've got to get out there and work hard for our candidate and for our principles.
Would you advise Mitt Romney to say something different today on RomneyCare than he has?
Well, I think it'd be great, I suppose, if he would come out. I think there are a lot of people who over the years have, since this thing passed in Massachusetts, have looked at it and said, gosh, I wish he would come out and then disown it or disavow it. It doesn't sound like he's going to do that. But
should he?
Well, frankly, I would like to see that, but then I'm not advising the campaign. I think he has to make a decision about, his ownership of that issue in Massachusetts.
Doesn't it hurt us though? We had to kind of takes that issue off the table in the campaign. Isn't that a biggie?
Well, I think that it certainly is something that he has to explain, and I think that there are distinctions, clearly, I suppose, as he has argued, between what Massachusetts does and what we do on a national basis. But I certainly believe that on a national basis it was a big mistake, and I think we're going to pay for it for a long time to come. And I think he has said that as well. I mean, he said if he's elected, he will repeal Obamacare, work to repeal Obamacare, and I think that's the important message to Republican voters out there, is this is a guy who's committed to undoing the damage that is going to be done by that terrible law.